When we talk about evolution, the first thing that most people think about is the evolution of plants and animals. But we can sometimes forget that the term itself can apply to lots of other things as well. It is not just about scientific theory surrounding biology. Evolution as a term is the principle of small changes adding up over long stretches of time. It's a way for us to understand how things change and grow more complex over time. We can see this in stars, planets, ecosystems, cultures, and even cultural ideas themselves follow this process of gradual change, adaptation, and survival. So, if we want to understand why religion exists, then we have to first understand that religion is a natural result of evolution. Richard Dawkins actually makes this case in his book, The God Delusion. He argues that religion grew out of human instincts shaped by evolution and developed slowly over generations, just like every other language, custom, and tradition. So, when we're talking about evolution, we're not just talking about life on Earth. We're also talking about the way that human beliefs and institutions came to be. Religion is just another outcome of evolution itself. Let's try and put this into perspective. I want you to think about how old our universe is. Think about the hundreds of billions of years that nebulas have been forming stars, that these stars have been existing, forming all sorts of new elements in their cores. They go supernova and they launch carbon, oxygen, iron, nitrogen, new material out into the universe. The material collides, forms together, forms planets and entire solar systems. Think about how many solar systems needed to be formed before one of them, as far as we know, was able to support life. Now think about, even from the moment that our Earth was formed, think about how long it took for it to be able to support life as well. It's the same principle that shaped the universe, that the longer things exist and the more chaos that can happen, the more likely that things are going to continue to change and to adapt and to survive. And so we can go from single cell organisms to multi-cell organisms to the vast variety of animal life and plant life that we have today. And that, of course, includes us. But we need to remember that not every evolutionary line survived. There are countless lines of evolution of entire species of animals that in one way or another were not able to adapt good enough to survive conditions on Earth. They weren't able to outcompete other animals. What set mankind apart from so many other branches of the animal kingdom was our development of larger brains, of our tribal cooperation, of our language. We were able to tell stories. We're able to pass on knowledge that continues from generation to generation. And what sets us apart from other animals that exist in the animal kingdom is the fact that we developed large, complex brains. We're able to recognize patterns. We're able to cooperate together as a group. We're able to communicate with language. We're able to pass down ideas from generation to generation. We're able to tell stories. We're able to explain our perceptions of the world to each other. And this has helped mankind survive, adapt, and persevere through countless generations. And it's also the reason that we eventually developed religion. It all comes back to the concept of evolution. The fact that every single thing builds off of the thing that existed before it. You need to think about ideas as if ideas themselves were living things. Ideas spread, they change, they evolve. They competed with each other. Some ideas survived because they were useful to people. Others fade simply because they're not. These ideas are often spread through stories. Stories explain why natural events occur. They explain why storms raged. They explain why the sun rose, why crops grew. They also helped to bind groups together. They gave people a sense of unity and purpose. Over time, stories evolved into traditions. Traditions became rituals, and rituals became religions. And we need to remember that these stories and these traditions and these explanations for the world around us began to form because of our instincts that shaped our natural selection. We have a tendency to trust authority figures because that helps our children survive. We have a tendency to see patterns that help us to avoid danger. We have a tendency to assume intent in a world full of predators. These instincts are useful to our survival, absolutely, but they also make us prone to believing in things that we can't see, especially if you consider our pattern recognition, right? If you're raised with stories of spirits and gods that controlled the weather, that controlled our fate, that gave you award and punishment, it can be easy for those ideas to be ingrained into the society because you can just accept them as truth because you see things that match the stories that you're being told. And as our communities and our societies became more complex and more organized, and these traditions became more deeply entrenched into our lives, the stories themselves became more complicated. We can see this progress through history, right? Early tribes believed in spirits that lived in rivers, trees, storms. The beliefs gave meaning to a world that felt hostile and unpredictable. But over time, cultures developed countless gods. Each one is tied to a specific rule. Thunder, war, love, even harvest. One of the earliest major shifts, though, was Zoroastrianism, where unlike a lot of the other systems that are surrounding it, Zoroastrianism emphasized this struggle between good and evil, light and dark, ideas that really formed this tradition of heaven, hell, angels, demons, and even a final judgment after death. Now, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam obviously all came from Zoroastrianism, but this is an example of how religious concepts can evolve, spread, and outcompete other religious ideas that are surrounding them. But we need to remember that evolution does not stop. Just because a religious tradition has been established, such as Christianity, Judaism, Islam, does not mean that it's done changing. Just in the same way that, say, Zoroastrianism was able to pave way for three of the major religions of the world, each of these religions has their own sects and their own interpretations. We can see a lot of the major religious shifts. We can see, say, Protestants breaking away from Catholicism, or we can even see restorational movements in a little bit more recent history, such as Mormonism. But you can also see changes just within your own life, or at least in the last several generations. Think about, say, your religious beliefs, your understanding of religion, your approach to spirituality, and compare it to your parents. There might not be that many differences, but then look at the previous generation. Look at your grandparents, your great grandparents, even. You can pretty easily see changes in approaches to religion. No matter what religion you are, I almost guarantee you have a slightly different approach to your religious beliefs than the generations that come before you. And these slight changes in religion, in spirituality, and in ideas about life are what causes major religious shifts that we see throughout history. It's what caused Zoroastrianism becoming Christianity. It's what causes changes in in Eastern Buddhism compared to Western Buddhism. The principle of evolution absolutely impacts religion, because every single generation is slightly changing their belief system that was taught to them from the generation before. And these changes compound, and they compound fast. But even with all of that, we need to remember that religion primarily existed and has existed as a way to explain the unexplainable. Religion existed as a way to explain lightning. There was a gap in our understanding, so we created a god to fill that gap. But as our understanding of the universe and of science gets better, then we have less gaps that we need to fill with God. So think about that. What is going to happen as we get further and further in scientific discovery and we have less need for a God because we already have the understanding? Okay, if you found value in this video and with what I had to say, then please feel free to like, subscribe. I would love to hear your thoughts. I also am putting in the description a link to The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. He presents pretty much every idea that I discussed in this video, and actually finishing that book is what motivated me to make this video and to approach this topic in the first place. So I would highly recommend checking that out. Another one that Richard Dawkins wrote is called the Blind Watchmaker, which basically presents the idea that just because something looks like it was intelligently designed doesn't necessarily mean that it was. So I'm going to drop both those book links down in the description. If you have read them, or if you do read them based on my recommendation, I would love to hear your thoughts on them in the comments below. And if there's any other topics that you would like me to cover, let me know, and see you later.